All righty, good afternoon. I'm Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin. Thank you for joining us on WWL Plus this afternoon. Kind of getting into a little bit more of a very detailed discussion about our severe weather threat. As a matter of fact, somewhat tonight, but more so during the day tomorrow. Now, through the night tonight, there is going to be a significant risk of severe weather. Really, notice this extends from central Iowa all the way down into the deep south, almost just north of us for a level 4 out of 5. This is associated with an upper low that we've been tracking really since it moved in from the west coast over the last couple of days. So the significant severe risk through the night tonight, far more elevated to our north. But notice, even the North Shore under a level 2 threat and then a level 1 for the rest of us. This fairly common. Not anticipating much activity, and in fact, models are not really in agreement with just how much thunderstorm activity we could see through the evening and night. Really what I think this is more of is that the atmosphere around us is already somewhat primed for severe storms and even some tornadic storms. It's just whether or not we actually get any thunderstorms to tap into that energy. Now, I'll start with a wider look at radar because notice there is really nothing off to our west right now. So when I change to our high resolution model, this model is already way too aggressive with the storms. This is the HER model, and this usually is a more accurate model. It just tends to be a bit more aggressive with thunderstorm activity, especially down in the Gulf Coast region. So keep in mind, this model already has thunderstorms along the state line of Texas, and there is nothing there at this hour. So this one, I think, a little bit too much with rainfall during the night tonight. But again, any isolated thunderstorm that does develop or could potentially develop has a chance to maybe tap into some of that energy and become strong to severe. Doesn't look like it's going to be an all-night event, probably through the evening and night, and then really not much of a concern after midnight tonight. The main focus, though, I just wanted to mention any thunderstorm potential for tonight. The main focus, though, shifts for tomorrow, and a significant threat that has increased for areas just to our north. Our neighbors from Hattiesburg to Jackson and across central Alabama, Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, a level 5. This is where we will likely see a tornado outbreak. Now, for us, we remain under that level 4. That includes the metro area river parishes, Baton Rouge, almost to Lafayette, all of our North Shore parishes, and our Mississippi counties, but a significant threat now just to our northeast. So Hattiesburg and areas northeast from there under a likely scenario for a tornado outbreak during the course of the day tomorrow. What I think we're going to see more of here, and again, I can't rule out one of two isolated strong tornadoes because this is kind of the setup when we have seen that New Orleans East tornado several years back, just a couple of years ago with the West Bank and then Arabi tornado. These are usually the types of setups that we see. We tend not to get outbreaks per se, meaning numerous tornadoes, but we tend to see maybe one or two stronger tornadoes that can stay on the ground for a while. Far more of a concern for areas just up to our north. I think we're going to be kind of the springboard for a lot of those storms to really intensify as they go deeper into that region. And that area, this is a different product. I know it kind of looks just like that Storm Prediction Center product, but this one is a product, and I'm getting some phone calls from a few of our reporters here. This is a product to show the heightened level 4 tornadoes. And obviously it's going to be right in that region from central Mississippi and into central western Alabama. Here is the setup that we're watching. Now through the night tonight, it's going to be this upper level low. This is the one that we've been talking about, and the one that even earlier in the week I was saying it's going to kind of intensify and really become anchored over the plains and then move up toward Minnesota, Wisconsin, and then eventually into central Canada. So just how much severe weather would we see? Well, it's not really this feature. It's going to be a developing upper trough on the back side of it. This is the feature that is really going to intensify the severe weather criteria, all the ingredients necessary across the Gulf Coast and the deep south. What this upper troughing is going to do as the cold front starts to approach us during the day today and tonight, and then going into tomorrow, is a surface low is going to form. That is going to kind of intensify the lift and the ingredients there to really amplify the severe weather threat. And with this upper low, or excuse me, surface low, that close down to this region, that is why we're looking at kind of from us as that the maybe jumping off point for a lot of those storms, and then including the Jackson, Hattiesburg, and into central Alabama for the severe weather during the day tomorrow. So those are kind of the setup and the triggering mechanisms. But as I mentioned, all the ingredients are also there. This is a product which kind of takes all those ingredients, puts them into one product that we call the significant tornado index, and does indicate kind of that high to at times even going into toward the extreme levels for the atmosphere to fully take advantage of that kind of primed conditions for tornadoes. Again, this does not mean it is guaranteed. This is kind of different from hurricane forecasting. All with tornadoes and severe weather we can do is look at the ingredients necessary. Are the triggering mechanisms there? And does the atmosphere take advantage of all of that? If so, it could be some significant severe weather. If there is one or two limiting factors, maybe we don't. Storm Prediction Center, though, is definitely highlighting more of our areas to our north, but keeping the Gulf Coast and southeast Louisiana in that discussion, because I think a lot of those storms will be forming here and then continuing northward into that track. We remain under kind of that high to nearing extreme levels for tornadic storms. So if those thunderstorms are able to take advantage of those ingredients and the triggers, then we could see some significant tornadoes. Again, with tornado forecasting, it is always far from certain. As we get later into the afternoon, notice those ingredients really start to fall apart, and then by the evening and night, rain is gone, ingredients are gone, and our weather finally starting to shape up. Now that one was based on the HRRR model, which I said is a little bit more aggressive. So let's take a look at our IBM graph model. Overcast skies tonight, but notice this model has no rainfall or maybe a stray shower or two. So as I mentioned, our rain chances, thunderstorm chances for the night tonight, not necessarily guaranteed. We'll keep a mention of about a 20% chance through the latter part of the evening. Now early in the morning, I think maybe an isolated stray shower possible. And as I mentioned, all the ingredients will be there, so while we may not see a great deal of coverage before the noon hour on Saturday, any one of those rogue little thunderstorms could quickly spin up and produce a tornado. The more linear type thunderstorm development that we're going to be watching doesn't really start to take shape until probably after the noon hour, and then starts moving in through the afternoon and evening. Now do notice it looks like a lot more of this could be north of the lake, but the Storm Prediction Center is still placing the metro area, so it really is going to be from the city north that we could see those severe thunderstorms and significantly severe thunderstorms fire up. As we go later into the night, again by 8 o'clock or so, models are in at least decent agreement with the timing. Some spotty mid-morning, so around 10, 11, noon. Most of the activity not till after about 1, and that'll continue till maybe 7, 8 o'clock, and then finally starting to wind down. So we are getting a better picture of the timing, and really the timing has, for the most part, been fairly well forecasted if it ends up verifying tomorrow. Mid-morning, a few showers and thunderstorms. There's that surface low that'll really help to intensify the storms up to our north and east. But as far as the timing goes for us, this is going to be an afternoon and early evening event. So if there is one upside to it, is that it is happening during the day, where more folks are going to be far more aware of the weather instead of trying to wait for your phone to wake you up from a deep sleep if these were coming in during the overnight hours. Also wanted to emphasize the winds. They have been strong today, sustained at over 20 miles an hour, and have been gusting up over 30 to 35 miles an hour. They're going to remain windy all day today and through the rest of the night. As we head into tomorrow morning, those winds will be gusting, or tomorrow morning through the afternoon, they're going to be gusting over 40 miles an hour, maybe even higher than that. Yet wind advisories in effect, so that will remain, could play a role in some of our bridges. We'll see if there are any restrictions on the causeway as we head into the day tomorrow. Those winds aren't going to be nearly as strong, but still pretty brisk even behind that front as we go later into the evening and night for tomorrow. So kind of mentioning that late morning threat just for some rogue thunderstorms. Again, if you have stuff to do, the morning is going to be okay. It'll be windy, but you still have time to go out. And maybe one of those days where you just start bringing stuff inside a little bit closer to the house, because those winds overall are going to be strong, let alone within some of the stronger thunderstorms where you're going to get those stronger wind gusts. Strong winds, tornado, hail, all very likely as we go throughout the afternoon and evening. So have those weather alerts able to be sent to your phone through the WWL app, because it will notify you, and for your area, you've got the geolocation to where it will notify you if there is a warning for where you are. Something that we have to pay attention to. I know it's kind of frustrating because folks are wanting more of a guarantee. With severe weather and tornadoes, all we can do is say the ingredients are there, the triggering mechanisms are there, and it's just a kind of waiting game to see if the atmosphere actually takes advantage of all the ingredients. But certainly everything is pointing to some significant severe weather across the Deep South. Katie?
Obviously, it's something that we've been tracking for several days now. Chris, you've been doing a fantastic job of that, trying to keep tabs on it and giving people adequate warning. As Chris just said, it is not an exact science in terms of specifically where a tornado could set up. So that's why we have that larger area where people really need to stay weather aware and alert, because, you know, this could be a potentially dangerous situation. And that's why we've been naming this a weather impact alert day for quite some time now, so that everyone can make their plans accordingly. Of course, we know the St. Patrick's Day parade in the Irish Channel has already been canceled, waiting to find out when that will be rescheduled. The parade on Sunday, however, apparently is going to be fantastic, unless there is, of course, tornado damage in areas that the parade rolls on. Hopefully, saying prayers out there that that's not going to happen. But what we do know right now is that the Irish Channel parade on Saturday in New Orleans has been postponed to an unknown time. Now, Chris, you've been talking about this for several days now. As you just mentioned, we don't very often see this level of a tornado threat in southeast Louisiana. I mean, typically these things happen farther to the north, farther to the east, farther to the west, but we kind of get the tail end of it. This is surprising.
Right. It is. I mean, it's not unusual, but even the threat levels of a 4 and a 5 aren't even guaranteed, even across the plains, Tornado Alley, the Deep South, and Dixie Alley. Even those level 5 threats sometimes are only once every couple of years. So kind of the same for us to see that threat level of a 4. We tend to see that once every few years, and it has been a couple of years since we have seen a significant severe weather threat, and it looks like this is going to be one of those years. As I'd kind of broken down, and I get a little bit into the meteorology with it a bit, with this upper troughing, the deepness of the upper trough, meaning how far south it's going to dig, the development of a surface low just to our north, just kind of indicating that we've got all the triggering mechanisms to help fuel to help get these storms going. And then, as I was showing you that tornado product, it's all the ingredients necessary for rotating storms, so where you're more likely to see tornadoes. Again, not a guarantee, but where it is more likely to occur, everything is coming into place where this is looking to be a more significant severe weather situation for the Deep South, certainly Mississippi, Alabama, but even for the Gulf Coast.
Yeah, and that's what's different about this one. I think you've mentioned a couple of times as we've continued to cover this over the last couple of days. I think everybody out there wants to know in their specific area what their risk is. One woman commenting, Candy over in Marrero, asking, what about that area? Are there certain areas that are at a greater risk tomorrow? I know you just mentioned it, but let's go over it again for people who are just joining us. Again,
the greatest risk, so metro area. If you are in the metro area, east or west bank, and I'll switch back over to our product from the Storm Prediction Center for the severe weather outlook. Metro area, river parishes, you're all under that level 4 out of 5, which is rare. And all of us, though, are under this hatched area, meaning a region that is more conducive for strong tornadoes, EF2 or above, and long track, meaning they touch down and they stay on the ground typically longer than we tend to see. One thing about southeast Louisiana and some of the nasty weather that we get, we don't often get strong tornadoes. Again, it is a little rarer. So significant that this is being now for us an issuance of a level 4. This isn't something that the Storm Prediction Center, the folks up in Norman, Oklahoma, do lightly. This isn't one of those, we're just kind of covering our rear end to make sure, just in case. This is indicating that they have strong confidence in this forecast of severe weather. And certainly when they issue that level 5, which again, they don't do every year. It's not as though this is something that you see frequently. When they issue that, it's likely that we're going to have significant weather across parts of the Deep South tomorrow.
Now, Chris, how's this different from a hurricane? hurricane? I mean, we know that hurricanes within them spawn tornadoes, but how is this different from what we see in that situation?
I guess in a way, there's a little bit more certainty with the impacts from a hurricane. We kind of know what the winds overall are going to be. We generally have a rough idea of what damage levels could be across an area, whereas with tornadoes, we just don't know if one is going to form. A little bit more certainty with a level 4 and a 5, but we definitely don't know where exactly they are going to form. So obviously with a hurricane, it's covering a much larger area. Now the severe weather impacts, as you can see from the graphic, does cover a large area, but that does not necessarily mean all of this area will be directly impacted necessarily. And by impacted, I mean you actually see damage. This is not meaning we're going to have widespread damage from across Louisiana, the entire states of Mississippi, Alabama, Florida Panhandle, Georgia, most of Tennessee, up into Kentucky, the Western Carolinas. It's just showing the areas of where it is possible to get the severe weather. One thing that also the graphic here does is try and stress the certainty of the forecast as well as the certainty of likelihood seeing severe weather. So this kind of breaks down the level 3 and 4 of storms, kind of in the numerous to widespread, as you can see from right here. Persistent storms or long-lived storms, few intense storms, more intense, and then also indicating a few to likely strong tornadoes. Again, not a guarantee, but it certainly is indicating a level of and I don't want to even say certainty, of a little bit more of a comfort level from the forecaster's perspective to issue those level 3s and 4s where they're more certain that there will be significant severe weather. Again, not a guarantee. We cannot 100% say we will see a tornado somewhere in southeast Louisiana, but certainly with the environment that we're looking at for tomorrow, it is a higher likelihood of that occurring.
Yeah, you know, Annie Day on Facebook just asked the question, you know, what's the timing of this? And I know you just kind of detailed it there, but generally, when could we see the worst of this? Are we talking, 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon, or what do you think the timing is going to be?
That's probably after 2 p.m. We're going to go later than 2 p.m. Let me switch. I've got a few different models that I want to show you. So again, kind of looking at the model with the tornado parameters on it, where the environment is more conducive for tornadoes. Again, going into the early morning hours, I think we're going to be okay. Some models indicating maybe a little rogue thunderstorm or two between kind of 8 and 9 to 10. And what I want to highlight though is that these colors, it's overlapped with the reflectivity, the storm reflectivity from the model, but it's also looking at the environmental conditions. So I was trying to stress with these graphics, and I know sometimes these can be kind of confusing. It's not something that we show very often. It usually only is during severe weather impact or weather potential impact. But just to kind of stress what this graphic means is these are looking at the environmental conditions around the area. So this is where if the atmosphere is able to tap into it and thunderstorms are able to fire up in this environment, they are more conducive to rotate and thus develop into a tornado. So even before a line of storms necessarily starts moving in, a few isolated rogue storms could fire up, and the environment is conducive for those rogue storms to rotate and thus possibly produce a tornado. So anything even in the early morning could possibly go strong to severe. More of a likelihood as we start to see kind of that linear shape take form, and that will be mainly during the afternoon hour. Notice even right at noon we could start to see somewhat of a line setting up, and then definitely this is going into 2 o'clock, 3 to 4 o'clock, still that line moving through, and then maybe wrapping up by about 5 or so around the metro area, and then clearing the Mississippi coast hopefully by about 7 or so after moving out of Harrison County, and then already clear of even the mouth of the river by about 8 or so. So the main timing that we're looking at is somewhat in the morning, but more so from about noon, let's say noon to 8 p.m. That's the window that we're going to be watching very closely.
And for a very large area of
yes, and I mean,
Louisiana.
and our viewing area, when we talk about it, so we're southeast Louisiana with the exception of Baton Rouge. So all of our parishes on the North Shore, Tangi, Washington, Washington, St. Tammany, and then from the river parishes, St. James, St. John, St. Charles, down to the coast, and then into Mississippi, Pearl River, and Hancock County. So we do have a very large area. So when we talk about the noon to 8, it's starting in our western parishes at noon and then moving through our Mississippi counties by 6 to 8 o'clock.
And happening right now, even as we're talking about this on our streaming app, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Those winds are already starting to pick up, and we have people asking on Facebook what preparations should they be doing right now to get ahead of this.
Anything loose out in the yard, any little flags, yard signs, decorations, I would just bring them or just bring them close to the house, put them in a garage, put them in a shed, just so that doesn't become debris flying around, because even without the storms rolling through tomorrow, the winds are going to be very strong and sustained over 30 miles an hour, gusting at times over 40 miles an hour, and that's not associated with the thunderstorms, which then themselves could produce wind gusts of 60 to 70 miles an hour.
Yeah, that is a lot of wind, and that does
Yes.
sound like a hurricane almost. So if you are
exactly.
thinking about those wind impacts from a hurricane, that is pretty much what you could expect for tomorrow. It's possible.
Right. Well, yeah, going into the hurricane force, but even near tropical storm force sustained, that's going to be across the area.
Okay. Yeah, that's a lot. Another question for you that I have even is, we have recently seen some EF0 tornadoes touch down. Those did significant damage.
They can,
so
absolutely.
when we talk about these things getting up to like the possibility of EF4 and EF5, what are we talking about there?
You're talking about winds in excess of 170 plus miles an hour. EF4s and 5s alone are very rare, even across the plains and deep south, so even rarer for southeast Louisiana. But yeah, EF0s, EF1s can do, fairly significant damage. And actually the classification of a tornado is based on the damage that the winds are estimated. It's based on the damage that it impacts, what it does.
Okay.
So the classification is actually done after the tornado has already passed. But what the environmental conditions are saying is that it is more conducive for those stronger tornadoes, not the EF0s and 1s, more of the EF2 to 3 for us.
And isn't that what we saw over in Arabi a few years ago?
Yes, and this was kind of a similar setup. We were under a similar risk, not necessarily the same setup with regards to the upper pattern and all, but we were under the same threat level for tornadic storms.
And we did see some significant devastation.
And we did say, and significant and widespread devastation.
And frankly, loss of life in that situation.
Yes.
We did see people actually die in that storm. So.
And it could have been worse, honestly, if that had been during the overnight, but I think enough people were awake and aware of the situation, like we're looking at for tomorrow. This is all going to be during the daylight hours. Really, the most dangerous part with severe weather is when it occurs after dark, after nighttime, when folks are in bed and asleep and aren't able to take those warnings as quickly as you would during the day. Obviously, we're going to be far more observant during the daylight hours.
Yeah, for sure. And you say this a lot, but again, tornadoes are not something that are an everyday occurrence for us, so people may forget. What do you need to do if you think a tornado is coming through your backyard?
If it's moving your direction, you want to be away from windows. You want to be really away from any exterior walls. So whatever is the most centrally located room of your house, it could be a closet, it could be a bathroom, one that does not have windows, as much into the center and first floor of your house as you can possibly get. That's where you want to be.
Okay, and when we talk about watches and warnings, sometimes this can confuse people as well.
It does.
What's the difference between a tornado watch and a tornado warning?
We will most certainly see watches issued tomorrow. A watch just means the conditions are ripe for a tornado. A warning means there is one on the ground. So a watch just means the conditions are favorable. The conditions will definitely be favorable. Like I said, I can almost 100% guarantee there will be a tornado watch issued for tomorrow. The warning, on the other hand, means one is either being observed by radar or one has been observed on the ground by a person. So there's actually different classifications of tornado warnings, where there's tornado confirmed and tornado emergency. A tornado warning usually generally means the radar has indicated that rotation, and so a warning has been issued. Doesn't guarantee that there's actually one on the ground. It just means that the radar is seeing it. Observed means it has been seen, and that has been relayed to the National Weather Service. And then emergency means it's been observed, and it's been observed to have done damage already. So those are kind of the three different classifications. And really, this is all newer in the last 20 or so years. There was a time, most of meteorologists are kind of get into it because as a kid they were fascinated by the weather.
Yeah.
There was a time where warnings for tornadoes were only issued if it was observed. So radars weren't nearly as good to pick up that rotation. And so Weather Service would actually wait for someone to see the tornado. Now at least you have a bit more of a heads up that the radar can see that rotation and indicate there is a high likelihood that there is a tornado on the ground.
Now, in recent years, we've seen the National Weather Service in our area move the radar sites. Is that going to impact your forecasting tomorrow?
Yes, it'll make it better because a lot of the storms that we're watching are going to be kind of moving generally from more of a west or southwesterly direction. And we move the radar, we being the Weather Service, from Slidell to Hammond, so it better samples the atmosphere to our west. One of the big reasons for that was Baton Rouge was actually not covered as well as they should have because of where the radar site was. It's been in Slidell for years, so they moved it to Hammond, so now we have a little bit better coverage out to the west where a lot of our storms are going to be coming from. So it does help us.
Okay, well, that's good news. That is a bright little shining light in this emergency. You know, people commenting on Facebook, their anxieties through the roof, you know.
And I understand, and you know, the graphics are scary, and believe me, I'm anxious ridden as well. Was scared of the weather as a kid, which is why I kind of went into meteorology. And something to alleviate the fears is that most of us, 95% of us or so, are not going to see anything. It's going to be that small percentage that could be impacted by a tornado that we're warning for. And where that small percentage is just the big unknown. It could be a tornado forms and it's out over the marshes and impacts no one. It could be out in the more rural parts of Tangi and Washington and it impacts no one. Or it could be right over parts of the metro area, then it impacts a lot of folks.
Yeah, you know, Kay Collins, thanks for being with us on Facebook. And she's asking, she says she lives in Hammond and they're planning to go to Gretna in the morning. Are they going to be at risk if they do that? Are they okay to make that trip? You
know, morning, and a lot of folks are asking about different drives during the morning. The morning is going to be okay. It's going to be wherever you are, and when you're trying to get back home, that'll be the issue. I know, I mean, I'll be here, but I will not want to be on the road during the afternoon or evening. It's going to be one of those, once you're wherever you're going in the morning, just hang there until these storms pass. Lots of events canceled already for Saturday. Yes. You think that was smart? Absolutely, because again, as we had mentioned, even early in the week when I was chatting with the folks with the Irish Channel Parade, I was trying to really stress that this wasn't just going to be a nuisance rain or even just some possibly dangerous thunderstorms. This will be a more significant severe weather event, and obviously that significance has increased in the last couple of days. Yeah, and people also asking on Facebook if this is going to be a flooding event. Are people going to need to move their cars to the neutral ground? This doesn't really look to be. It's going to be a fairly fast-moving setup. This is not really going to be a flooding concern per se. Okay. As a matter of fact, I've been trying to build my graphics here and get things updated for our newscast, but then also doing my update here. Little graphic here for Saturday. Isolated street flooding. More than not, it's going to be overall 3/4 of an inch to an inch of rain. Some isolated spots could maybe see a little bit more, but that would be very, very isolated. So I don't think this is going to be really a flooding issue, as the storms themselves will be fairly fast moving. We also had people asking about the airport tomorrow and whether or not this means that we're going to see definite air cancellations and flight cancellations and things like that. I mean, that's certainly possible. I can't speak for the airport, but certainly as these storms are approaching, I would think you might see some flights delayed. And then, of course, for New Orleans, it depends on what happens out in Houston, Atlanta, and other hubs to where if flights are delayed or canceled. But I would, certainly if I'm flying out tomorrow, I'm on the Fly MSY website and watching those flights. Yeah, I think getting to and from the airport could be an issue at some point. And that certainly could be an issue, especially if you're trying to do an afternoon flight and driving out to the airport. It's one of those days where it's not great to be out on the roads. Yeah, someone from Slidell is asking, how is that area going to look? It did appear from your graphics that the North Shore is at even greater risk. For the severe weather or flooding? Yeah, just for the severe weather and for tornadoes. I mean, generally speaking, it tends to be a little bit more focused on the North Shore with regards to severe weather. But, you know, I don't want to discount the fact that also the metro area is placed under that level 4 threat. So you can kind of see from our model here where storms make it going a little bit sooner just because of the way this line is going to be set up from northeast to southwest. So the North Shore tends to get it first. Even the metro area will be a starting off point for these storms. Not as much south as we go toward the coast, but even those areas, while you're under a level 3, not the 4, that is still a significant threat, and everyone is under that hatched area for strong tornadoes.
And then look at Biloxi, Mobile on that graphic that you have on the screen right now. That is the area that is pink on your threat level, right?
Yes, well, not Biloxi. They're not pink. They're
okay, up farther.
It's a little bit farther north.
Okay.
So the area under the level 5 threat, just outside of our viewing area, but certainly folks in Hattiesburg, Southern Miss, a lot of kids that go there. We have, obviously close connections with Hattiesburg, basically almost a suburb of our viewing area. So a lot of connections there, and they are under that heightened level 5 threat, which again, just the level 5 is a rare forecast from the Storm Prediction Center. This isn't even something, again, that you would see every year.
Okay, yeah, and it's outside of a hurricane. We're used to dealing with those. We get adequate preparation time for those. We know how far in advance we might have to evacuate. That's not the case with this. So
right, and even trying to compare the two is difficult, but even when we're talking about the winds from a hurricane, the wind field is going to be different for everyone, and the damage is sometimes different. There may be pockets of greater damage than in others, and with tornadoes taken out of the equation, some of these thunderstorms are going to have strong winds. So even if it's an EF0 or just wind gusts of 70 miles an hour from a thunderstorm, damage is damage. And whether it was caused by the thunderstorm winds itself or a tornado, the folks don't really care. Damage occurred or possibly occurs again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is obviously scary for people, especially.
It is, and again, it is nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
We're going to be following this as the line develops right through it, passing across southeast Louisiana into southern Mississippi, and then kind of wrapping our coverage of it up by about 7, 8 o'clock tomorrow night.
Okay, so you can always tune in on WWL Plus or on Facebook Live. We will continue to stream all of our severe weather coverage for you tonight and into tomorrow. Chris is going to join us here on WWL Plus around 7 o'clock again tonight. If you want to ask any questions on our Facebook Live stream, we'll also have the very latest forecast for you on the WWL Louisiana News at 5 on Channel 4. So we'll see you then.